Welcome to Decentral Lens, where lifelong friends Blutoshi and Disco navigate the ever-evolving crypto landscape. With genuine curiosity and a commitment to nuance as our North Star, we offer clear-eyed exploration. Our goal? To empower listeners with the tools and insights needed to flourish in this decentralized age.
Hey everybody, welcome. We're live streaming this one to YouTube. We're just messing around and we're trying different things right now, but I am Blutoshi, formerly Chicago, and on my right is my trusted partner in crime, Disco. Sorry, Disco, I always change the cadence on the intro for you, and you're like, I'm coming. So without further ado, here's Disco.
I feel like Hank Kingsley, like when am I throwing my hay now into the intro? But we're happy, but we got, I'm the artist known now as Disco X, and certainly stoked to be live and doing this and just always trying to expand our horizons and see what makes the most sense for our audience. It feels like it's almost like we're, coming back from like a big break or something, like, hey, it was after, the summer or the holidays or first day of school. And it's really only been a week since we've, done a show together. But gosh, if you really look at what's transpired in that week, it seems like there's been a lot of things going on for sure. Yeah,
it's crazy. It's been fun. So Disco, I'm going to call you Disco and not Disco X. The OX I think is silent. It's almost like French. So, I gotta look at that. I gotta table that moving forward. Like, I don't know if I want the OX forever. I gotta see what I need to do there. Yeah,
maybe a little strategy play.
Well, yeah, and the more you go towards Bitcoin, and we just look at agnostically a bunch of chains, like the more the OX, it's very ETH centric. For those who don't know or newer people to the space, all Ethereum addresses start in OX, and all newer Bitcoin addresses. Disco, should I put you on the spot, or should I just say what they start with?
What's that? BC?
BC1, yeah. So that's a Taproot address. So you'll always see that. So I would recommend dropping the OX. It's probably tougher to get the name on Twitter, but I think it frees you up. As everyone knows, I just switched from Chicago X, or Chicago to Blutoshi, and the Blutoshi is kind of in line with my blue ordinal punk on the ordinal space, and I got lucky enough to get in that first weekend and really soak it up. And then ordinals has gone up and down. We've spent a lot of time in ETH and going back to on-chain there, kind of revisiting the past. I started in Bitcoin, then went to ETH for the NFTs, and now coming back to Bitcoin is beautiful. And Bitcoin is and Solana, those are the two on fire. And as we talked about in last week's show, ETH is kind of crabbing along, and there's a lot of airdrop FOMO-y stuff there, but it's like, I don't know about you, Disco, but it doesn't even appeal to me right now. I can't think of anything but Ordinals and RSIC, which we'll get into. Your thoughts?
Well, I think I've having known Blutoshi for a minute, a lot more than a minute, but knowing him for a long period of time, one of the things that I appreciate is the passion to what is, on the top of your mind at that point. And, when we first started talking, you were very much more centric on Ethereum. And if you've listened to the shows, you've kind of seen that development, and then you go back. But I will say, I wanted to give you credit on something for sure. It's like, there's this huge rush now and this kind of, FOMOization kind of the space overall gravitating towards, ordinals. And we're seeing all that with, many of the different stories coming out of it. But I'll say this, I think that what's cool is you were genuinely just interested in the opportunity and the innovation of what ordinals could represent from as soon as you kind of sniffed it out. And I remember you were like, cobbling Excel sheets together and doing all sorts of stuff, but it was really about this light bulb kind of going off and you being like, dude, this is fascinating. I want to explore it. It wasn't from like kind of this mindset of, oh, I better get involved because then I'll get taken care of down the road with drops or anything. It was a purely passion and, intellectual interest for you. And I remember when you first started explaining it to me, when you were being like, yeah, I don't know, man, I'm starting to really think about this. It's like that Star Wars chess checkers, and all, or Star Trek and everything. And I was like, he really, you had the bug from the very beginning. So it's got to be kind of cool to see a lot of people kind of coming around to it and really giving it kind of the love and the support that it seems to merit at this point.
Yeah, it's kind of cool because I mean the whole thing. Casey introduced it all, I think, like December of 22, so just over a year ago. But it went live. Those guys were inscribing kind of before it officially went live. But the rest of us, like collectors, got in. I'm seeing all the 1-year anniversaries of the Ordinals, so I'm assuming late January was when we all got in. So last week, a year ago, and yeah, it was cool. And I collected a couple things, and I'm the cool thing about it is I feel good to this day about the choices I made. I stupidly didn't get in on the Ordinal punks at the actual mint. It just, I didn't find it yet until like 2 days later, but that 2 days was the difference between, parting with, some Bitcoin and parting with 0.01 Bitcoin, because Flowstay is a legend in the space, and he did a fair drop to everybody. He has one that's just legendary, the robot beard one, and we were doing deals with people where he was the intermediary, because there was no, until about 5 months later, there was no ecosystem. Magic Eden wasn't selling Ordinals. They're kind of the only game in town like OpenSea is now, but it was all done on spreadsheets, listing and bids, and Flowstay and a couple of the other more trustworthy guys became the middle folks. And he might have taken a small percentage after he had to do a bunch, but at first, like for initial sales, he wasn't doing that stuff at all. He's just impeccable person and took the high road, because I think he came from the ETH ecosystem and the early NFT days, and he wanted to create something cool. It was an homage to punks with the Ordinal punks, and I'm glad I got in. And I would say similar with the inscribed Peppies, those were a little more expensive. Those were auctioned off, so they waited a little longer. Not quite the same experience, but a great team all the same. And you know what? If I'm going to put money in their coffers to build out, that's great. And they did little Peppos, which are all but a couple sub 500 uncommons. I think it's the biggest sleeper in the space. Obviously, this wasn't going to be just an Ordinal show, but I think Lil Peppos as uncommons, they're all, like I said, I think the first quarter of them are sub 500s, but they're all sub 5 or sub 1,000. So they're all 3-digit uncommons, and it's a 420 collection. Because now the big thing is those uncommons are the first Ordinals uncommon 10,000 PFP collection. And I guess for me, like, who cares? Like 10,000, that's such an ETH thing to do. But and when Node Monkeys first came out, I was actually, I don't want to say I was bearish, but I just wasn't interested, because I'm like, I'm part of a collection that has 69 inscribed Peppies, under 5K inscription. I've got Ordinal Punk that's sub 500 inscription, and then I've got my little Peppo, which is the uncommon. The 10,000 I didn't care about, but the Node Monks, those have grown on me more and more, because it's original art. They're so minimalist. The more you look at them, kind of the cooler they get. So I think those personally will stand the test of time. So I know we're jumping right into Ordinals, but that's where all the energy is now, Disco. I mean,
well, yeah. And I was going to ask you this. I was thinking about this, because as people who've listened to the show know, like I'm experiencing my first kind of full cycle, and I came in and just got my legs kind of swept out from under me into a bear, and I embraced it and enjoyed it, and probably was one of the weird people that's like, dude, this is cool. It gives me a chance to kind of get up to speed on some stuff. But does this kind of Ordinals and RSIC fervor and fever, is that what kind of like a bull market does kind of feel like, where you're looking at this and it's like, well, I can't imagine, the RSIC floor going up. There's got to be a pullback. And then you just keep looking and it's really that up only stuff, and I've never really experienced that before. And it just seems like people find liquidity. They're finding what they need to do to be able to get involved with this. And, kind of the imagination and the passion and just the interest in where things can go just seems so infectious that I just wonder, I'm just not used to kind of a more bull markety environment.
Oh yeah, dude, this is full, and I know you don't see it with everything. Like, we already saw the price of Bitcoin go up from 20 to 40. Obviously that was all ETF related, but and I know you were alluding to this before, like I got in Ordinals early because I discovered it. I loved it. Then you and I started our show. We spent time with Ordinals explaining it to people. And if you haven't listened, go back. If you want a cool analogy of why Ordinals are so cool, hint, everything is on chain, whereas ETH, only things like Chaos Roads, CryptoPunks, Autoglyphs. There's only a small subsection that are fully on chain. So you're dependent on these secondary things. But go back to our early shows and listen to that because to this day, even though those are janky PowerPoint slides we put together, I should say keynote slides, I don't use PowerPoint, but I'm proud of those. And I'm proud of how we synthesize the information and put that stuff out there. But fast forward to today, what you were alluding to, now is airdrop season. I didn't buy those old things in anticipation of these, but now we got R6, which is just taking the world by storm. And that's what Disco's saying. Like, it's amazing. 1 week, he and his significant other go out of town for 2 days, do a little fun snow activity. And he comes back. I'm like, dude, we did a spaces. We had, 2,300 tune in and like the phone doesn't stop buzzing. He's like, wait, what? Wait, hold on, what happened? So it was really cool, and it just shows like stick with your craft, do what you love with the people you love and the people you trust, and don't be a business school dork and lay out a roadmap and pro formas and all that stupid crap. Just create and do what you love and what you enjoy and what you're good at with the people that you like, and just see what doors open. I mean, what else is there to say?
One of my biggest takeaways from business school was I quickly realized that kind of the numbers people that would be in your group projects are like, well, we can just add another one into this Excel and it looks like a great plan. And you're like, well, that's not real, right. And then when the faculty starts,
let's just 10x the income and then the model works.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a model. There's a lot of assumptions. And it's like, dude, assume this, just get in there and play in the real world and figure this stuff out and kind of go as you go. One of the things also that we were looking at kind of how the show is structured and, what we're covering and how to do it. And it really feels like now Bitcoin has like kind of two different heads. It's like a two-headed monster now. So you have the more TradFi side of it. I hate saying that term, but you have that kind of its infiltration within the traditional financial system and ecosystem. So you have that way to look at it through kind of price and ETFs and everything like that, which we've done and do. But then you really do now have to almost carve out kind of the degen side. And that's where, so much of the spirit is. So it's interesting to see, Bitcoin go from getting this approval and becoming, quote, mainstream, but then seeing all of this organic interest and activity within more of the really kind of experimental and cutting edge and more degen space. So it's just an interesting kind of dichotomy that I wouldn't have predicted, that all of a sudden we'd have to kind of look at it with two different lenses and two different hats.
Yeah, that's a really good way to frame that out. And you said something interesting. You said the spirit, and you said, I would say Ordinals are the soul of crypto. Like, again, I think I've said this in past shows, but I probably talked to you and anyone who will listen a million times. Like, when I first got into crypto in 2015, like I couldn't stop learning and just soaking it all in, everything I could, the technical stuff, the non-technical stuff, how it's traded, everything I possibly could. But when you're in a bull, you're like, yay. And you kind of celebrate with a couple people, but when you overlay Ordinals and art and artists like Vivid and Hardo and Lemon Haze and Otto, I mean, there's so much good art on Bitcoin, obviously on ETH too, probably Solana. But when you bring the artists in there, then you bring the collectors, you now have created an ecosystem with a soul. And it's funny because the Bitcoin maxis, they're about Bitcoin. Bitcoin was first, and it's all about just money. And I just listened to a really interesting podcast with Peter McCormack, and I still love listening to what Bitcoin did. The shirt, in fact, is, I think it's like the practice jersey from his soccer team, but he's trying to take his soccer football team from like I'm going to get the words wrong because I'm a dumb American, but like from tier 12, like beer league up to the professional leagues. And I guess there's 8, 9, 10 steps, and you have to keep making your stadium bigger, and his town is giving him all this stuff. But I'm wearing that jersey because I'm supporting him. But a guy named Peter Rizzo, who I believe is the founder or is on Bitcoin Magazine. I think and Bitcoin Magazine does an excellent job, but Peter McCormack hasn't really, he doesn't call himself a maxi, which is funny. That tells you there's more maxi people than people who can't stand ordinals. Like the people who are just total purists probably got in the fight at the original fork with Bitcoin Cash, which I won't get into because half of the people here would be like, I don't even know what you're talking about. But that was like the news. That was the news like 6 or 7 years ago. And it was awesome. But Pete Rizzo did an awesome job of explaining to Peter McCormack why NFTs are important. Sorry, I'm just going to scratch that. Why inscriptions are important. I corrected someone on our space. I'm like, don't you be saying NFT on this show. It's inscriptions. Because that was a well thought out word. Whereas NFT is by far the dumbest, most poorly branded word that stuck. I get what it is, non-fungible token, but it's just stupid. So Peter did a great job explaining to Peter, but where I think it even fell short, because Peter McCormack's just like, that's great. Like, I guess they're okay. He has to kind of cater to his audience, but he's just like, I don't care. I think someone needs to take the argument up one level and say to him, you believe that Bitcoin is a currency and freedom to transact with no censorship. And he would say, yes, of course. And then I would follow up and say, what about freedom of information? What if there's something like Satoshi's white paper or something that, the New York Times, Fox News, or whoever, traditional media literally won't post, that's a super important piece of information for citizens to kind of retain their freedom, kind of like Phil Zimmerman did with the pretty good cryptography, or PGP, I think it was called. He literally put it on t-shirts, and the government was going after him for being like, it was like espionage, it was like treason, because encryption and cryptography, the basis of everything Web 2 and obviously crypto, came from that guy. So, but I think if you said to Peter, like, look, let's just say hypothetically there was a news story and we Ordinals lovers had the truth, and it was a headline like, this group actually responsible for carnage, a thing. And I'm just making up an example because obviously we're seeing so much war in the world, and that was inscribed on the Bitcoin blockchain. Well, then that's immutable, right? That's infinite. So if money can be immutable and you can make clean transactions in Bitcoin with the UTXOs, why can't information be immutable too? Like, why, if you can have your cake and eat it too, why not? And the more people that come in, the more developers that come into Ordinals, the more the Bitcoin ecosystem is going to harden. I don't think Ordinals folks are asking to change the code so we can have, 6 gigabyte videos in the Bitcoin SAT, UTXO transactions. I think the beauty is we're working in a system that's already constrained and wasn't really built for it. But again, I've said this before, but I think this is one of the most important points right now. Like 97% of Ordinals projects, NFT projects, Solana projects, maybe 98, 99, they're going to zero. But that 1 or 2% that isn't, maybe it's RSIC, maybe it's not, but a meta protocol on top, that could be the solution to be able to scale Bitcoin to make transactions cheaper, so people in poorer countries can onboard with Bitcoin. Lightning Network isn't really cutting it now, and they're not dependent on using the Tron like USDC coin swap just to get out of their currency. So a lot to swallow there, but that podcast really inspired me to take it to the next level. And I think that's where this next generation of thinkers, where our heads are at. Of course, Bitcoin freedom to transact, first and foremost, as a money, is number one. But if you have an ecosystem in your ecosystem, you've got gold. A busy blockchain is a healthy blockchain, right, Disco? So,
yeah, and like we always talked about, one of the things you always talked about that was attractive, early on when NFTs came out was the sense of you being able to be part of something else and be part of, community and be able to connect and have that interaction. And now you're seeing that happen in this other ecosystem. And what's fascinating to me, just trying to, kind of speed run and catch up a little bit on this, is just seeing the intense passion and the intense, like I've never seen rabbit hole lovers more than what I'm seeing, from the spaces. You're like, there are gentlemen and people that are just so into it. And there's so many new morsels that they're not like running to the end of the road and be like, oh no, I got to figure it out. They're like, right. But wait, it goes down another level. And it's like, whoa. So I just think that it's safe to say that it's certainly captured, the imagination, and to use your mindshare reference, it certainly captured the mindshare of the space overall.
The
and,
ODM,
that's one of
the Ordinals degenerate mindshare. It's going to take us a while to get it, but hopefully we're throwing that out there that everyone takes it. And I love Inscribed because he right away he adopts him. He's like NGO. And I didn't make that one. NGU number go up, spin around forever. But ODM, and I think we had one other, and he right away was just on it and using it. I'm like, dude, you are genius. But Disco, why don't we, since we're bringing that up, let's just front run that. Like, so what happened in this last week that we're all kind of like, now we're in a different space now. No pun intended.
What happened, meaning overall?
Well, just like with the spaces, like you're bringing up like all the comments and you saw the deep dives, like just explain to the audience just kind of what happened there with that. And then maybe give an example of we definitely tapped into the RSIC zeitgeist and allowed people who were so into this thing to like explain it, far better than I ever could, because they've dug so deep down that rabbit hole. And I think what you and I loved about it was we get to sit back and learn, ask the right questions, add if we can, but just like learn more and more about how RSICs could be, this Runes protocol could be something big.
Well, I think what's so fascinating, and, from my perspective, and I think everything else is just, I think that seeing something get rolled out that has thought behind it and has elements of, storytelling, yet building and innovating and leaving kind of the viewer, if it was a show, right, wanting more, and then having kind of this interface where they're pretty much telling you in the white paper, like, hey, everything's in there, so just having this kind of this map and being like, everybody can go and look at the same information and come up with your own theories and theses and strategies. Like, that's what is so magical about what's going on from kind of just the intellectual perspective. And then you have, people forming different groups based on strategies on how they can implement this or that. People are having different, kind of takes on what this could mean, but collectively being involved in those spaces, it's just interesting to see just a ravenous interest in something and a collective desire to see it just really transcend and be kind of this new kind of the new level set of what could be done, and I've always, we've talked about this before, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I always go back to, movements and bands or artists, and the coolest stories and the coolest flow to me is always based on an element of an air of mystery. So you had Daft Punk with the helmets, you had hip hop coming up from where it is, you had punk rock come up from where it is. So when it's like mysterious and you can kind of be part of the choose your own adventure sort of vibe of where things head and where they go, like I think that's what really helps to capture the imagination. And once you have people's imagination captured, then you get to tap into them at kind of their best. So you're getting people that are stimulated and, using their minds in a different and more exciting way. So the output from that is ultimately going to be very positive.
Yeah, well put. And just to set the table backwards, like I always do, I always write the meat and then we explain what it was. So there was, when Disco and his significant other were out of town last Friday, RSIC and this Runes protocol on Bitcoin Ordinals just went nuts. And I reached out to someone who was posting really cool stuff named Inscribed, and that's it's inscribed and both the I's are ones. If you want to follow him on Twitter, the guy's awesome. But I just said, let's do a spaces. Let's just talk about RSIC. We're all thinking about it. We can't stop thinking about it. Let's talk about it and let's get the smartest minds in here. And I think, obviously when you host your own spaces, and this is for those who really don't know, Twitter X has something called Spaces. Think of Clubhouse if you've ever heard of that, which kind of went defunct once Spaces came out. But you jump on, think of it as a live radio show where you can call people up to the stage, and you can have 10 people up at a time. You have a host and a co-host, and you really basically produce like a radio show live in front of everybody. It's really cool and it's really dynamic, and that's why we're all fired up. We had 22 or 2,300 people last Friday, and then just yesterday, Tuesday, there's so much information coming out in these RSICs. We had another 1,500, but the live viewers, the first one was 1,000, and we got another 1,400, I think, from the viewers. So this one I expect to go up even beyond that. So it was a really cool feeling, and I don't tune into a lot of spaces because for whatever reason, they exhaust me. A lot of times it's just alpha pumps and this is going to the moon and you're going to make so much money if you do this. And, I'll listen to some of the artist ones. Those are good. But sometimes those, like artists are really good at being artists, and some of them are really charismatic, but some of them you got to drag it out of them, like the process and stuff like that. So it's sometimes it's compelling content and sometimes it's not, but those are the ones I love the most. But I've never heard of spaces, and you made a good point. There's been good spaces for general news, but for crypto itself, they're really, there's some out there, but none have really stuck with me where I'm like, I gotta listen. I always feel like like I said, I just get tired because they play all these sirens and sounds, and it's like it's like a schlocky talk show, a radio show of a DJ that you don't love from like the 90s, where it's just over the top energy,
it's like a morning zoo, that was the old format.
Perfectly put. So we slowed everything down. We got the smartest people we could on stage, and we got lucky. I didn't know what Inscribed would be like, and to say he over-delivered was an understatement, but everybody did. There were so many, I can't think of one person who didn't add value to the conversation. A couple of people in the section went on a little long, but you know what? That's part of it. So it was exciting. We might as well go straight into the ordinal stuff now, where, we've been talking about it. We're here. It was, I'm shocked. We've got our little thing in front of us, both Disco and I, our little log sheet, show sheet. And it's like the fourth thing. And now looking back, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. We're just buzzing about this thing. So, I guess, is there much more? Go listen to the spaces. If you have a Twitter account, go listen to the spaces. There's two of them. It's Blutoshi, BLUTOSHI, at Blutoshi. That's me. You'll see a blue guy with a Burger King cap. Looks like a little crypto punk. It's an ordinal punk. You'll see it. It's pinned right up there. Listen to the first one first from last Friday, and then listen to the second one. It's 5 hours of content, and it was really engaging. So if you want to learn more about RSIC, definitely get into it. And the price on RSIC has run, and it's we won't look at it now, but it's 0.125 Bitcoin, which is, it ran quite a bit. What was it yesterday, Disco? It was probably at 0.9.
Well, during the spaces, it was trying to break to the 0.1, it was right at that threshold. And then, you mentioned, the world's a big place, and there's different zones and areas of interest on this. So it does kind of seem like there's some interest in the Western market, and then you kind of see the Eastern market as well kind of either lead the way or trail, or whatever your perspective is on the starting line. But you definitely see it kind of continue to go. And yeah, I agree. I think folks should check out the spaces. That's the kind of the definitive way to kind of get caught up on everything there, and bring in Inscribed in, and just some really smart folks from around the world. We're really chiming in with these different theories, and it's fascinating to be able to actually do something like that and hear commitment and interest from a global perspective, because you're also going to then get different perspectives. So that's what's really kind of refreshing about it. It's not just a bunch of kind of the same sort of people, kind of pounding each other's chests and reading their resumes. So it was very refreshing. Obviously, we're buzzing about it. When we were looking at it, there was something that, we might as well wrap up kind of the Ordinals part of the thing. There was the whole cats thing kind of launched, while we were doing that Spaces. And if you look at, what's going on there, it's at 0.332 right now for a floor. So
yeah, 3x plus, right? 3.5x. So, and I think it got up to 0.38 this morning. So I think both for, and this is for those who don't know, this is Atomic Cats. This is the Taproot Wizards, which, a lot of the influencers in the space, Udi Wertheimer, Dan Held, this is their project. And they actually haven't launched the Taproot Wizards yet. They've passed out, I think, a quarter of them to big names like Nick Carter and folks who have made a big impact in the space, but they haven't even passed those yet. The Atomic Cats are their first drop that they actually minted. It was 0.1 Bitcoin, so about $4,300 for one of these. I think a lot of people flipped, but I was actually wrong on this. I don't know how long it will last, and I'm fine to be wrong. Like I want everyone to succeed in this space, but I thought it would go up and then RSIC would just vacuum that liquidity to a lot of flippers. But I think there's people, and I always forget about the other side of the world. Like with R6, like we'll run our course for the day and the price will go up. And then by, late, people are on Netflix or watching movies or watching sports, not as much activity. Then China wakes up and then all of a sudden the price just goes to a whole nother level. So there's almost this, the sun on two sides of the earth, night and day, where two separate markets are driving these things up. And I think with Atomic Cats, the same thing happens. So people want to collect them. And I will also say one other thing, Disco. What I did, I took a little quiz this morning. I sent it to you. I don't know if you went through it or not. The questions.
I took it.
Yeah, it was about Atomic Cats and it was about OP Cat, which we're not going to go into too much detail, but it's basically about what Satoshi did with Bitcoin code. He had a cat. There was a call called OP Cat that actually allows for possibly the quantum encryption of Bitcoin and other benefits. So, as much as I kind of, I definitely fudded the Atomic Cats, and maybe I didn't need to. It's not interesting to me. And, people be like, oh, you missed out. Be like, no, I'm glad I set this one out. I didn't plan on it. But I got to say, after I took that test and failed it miserably on like the actual code of Bitcoin and what the possibilities were. Now, is this all hype for them to launch these things? Probably. But there's a cool element. These guys came more from the core Bitcoin kind of dev and maxi world. So, hats off to them. There's room for a ton of people. Again, it's not for me, but it's interesting. And it ran, R6 are running, Deuce by Vivid. Vivid's emerging, I would say, as the number one, what's the right word? Virtual art house or gallery, if you will, just like 6529.
And that's what we've been looking for. Yeah.
Fingerprints. Vivid has emerged. Like a couple people in my OG groups were all over that in the early ones where they now get airdropped everything. Like where I was back in looking at old on-chain stuff and ETH, these guys just crushed it and have been followers since the beginning. Now I'm playing catch up there, but you know what? So what? Like if I have to pay higher, then if I can afford it, I'm happy to get in on that. The Deuce X machine launched yesterday by Vivid, produced by Vivid, I should say, and it's beautiful.
So what you were kind of getting at there, or what kind of came from that to me, is that it's maybe in this new phase that we're entering, when we're talking about it not necessarily being a one chain wins all, and it's kind of more of a multi-chain world, and you're seeing all this stuff. We want to do this show to help people get involved and have an understanding of everything. But to full disclosure, there's so many different things that are popping that it is, it's very hard to be able to be, in front of and early adopting every single thing. So we'll try our best to keep people aware of all the different, things that are out there and themes and kind of things that are breaking through. But there's going to be certain things that, we didn't line up with, or we didn't, get involved with early and give support to. And we certainly want to be able to be open to address that, but also to give coverage to innovative stories. And I think that's something that we need to look at overall. And it's basically just, when you have an ecosystem just start growing, and then you have multiple ecosystems, it's a full-time job just to kind of stay on top of it. And that's, it's, I don't think it's any fault of any person to be like, oh, I kind of missed that one. It's like, dude, how can you not miss some of these things? It's great.
Yeah, rising tide raises all boats for sure. And you nailed it on the head. You just simply can't look at everything. Like when we were talking about Solana and we saw it run from 20 to 95 or 128 or whatever, like in the 70s, I'm like, all right, I'm jumping on this train, at least with a little. And I just put it there. I'm not going to buy NFTs there because that's adding a layer of, do I think the Solana chain will be around in 10 years? And do I think whatever they're on Arweave or IPFS that the images are stored on will be there? And the answer to that right now is Solana, probably be around, but will the Arweaves and all that stuff? Probably, but I don't want to store. That's not where I prefer to store my stuff. We're turning into on-chain maxis, and Bitcoin obviously has solidified that with inscriptions, because unlike any other chain on Bitcoin, everything is on chain by default, which is how it's created, and that's what makes it so cool. The fact that it was the first chain out there, it was hardened money, yet there was still a way to come back and put NFT inscriptions. Thank you. And
there you go.
Yeah, and more importantly, like I said, like that news story, or like what is art, and obviously you could put bad things on there too. And obviously the things, the exchanges can block that stuff. That's definitely a problem when something's immutable forever. But, there's other ways with the front ends to block that stuff. So, there's no perfect solution, but I think where there's freedom to transact immutably outside of being controlled by the big banks, there's also freedom of information that cannot be manipulated or adjusted too. That's on the chain and saved for infinity.
Okay. Well, let's take a step back and kind of just look at, the overall and I don't want to say macro crypto, but in a way it's almost like that now, looking at, the different ecosystems and the news out of all those things. And I mean, kind of the big headline, at least from yesterday, would have to be, that Solana was down and inoperable for 5 hours. And my understanding, or what I'm baffled by, is that's pretty significant. Like, I'm just going to say that, if it's not working for 5 hours, and I would think there would be a corresponding reflection of that in the price. But if you look at the price of Solana right now, 24 hours after a 5 hour outage, it's above where it was when that happened. And I just can't I can't square it away in my head that the number goes up even if the network goes down. Like, to me, there's just something that it's giving my little senses just some red. I don't really know what to make of it. Any help kind of processing that would be encouraged, because I just don't get it.
Yeah. And it's funny because that was my same thing too. I think I wrote a tweet yesterday, like, and I used to just make jokes about it, because there was a period where it went down like 4 or 5 times in a couple months when I was writing those jokes for that rug thing. And and Solana, I always picked on Solana because it was fun and it was VC backed and very centralized, and Chamath and those guys were always like shilling it on their show or like taking different stances. So it was definitely a fun one to make fun of. But Disco, I'm with you. That was a complete head scratcher. Okay. Like, how does something go down? It just shows you people either don't know, aren't paying attention, or simply don't care. I'm pulling up this proof of stake chart for a reason you probably wouldn't expect. So this shows you what percent of staking is in each network. So ETH, right now we're at what? We're at 24% of ETH, or 25%. So a quarter of the ETH is staked. The reward's 3.67, but remember they have a deflationary rate, so your return is 3.74%. So we know ETH because staking, they do it better.
Can I ask you a quick question about that?
Yeah.
Does this reflect restaking, or how will that be impacted on these numbers? I'm curious when that starts kind of getting rolled out more so, because you're hearing everything. That's one of the big stories on the Ethereum side is, the Eigen layer and the restaking and how that's going to revolutionize and change things. It'll be interesting to see how this gets kind of charted and impacted into these numbers.
Yeah, it will certainly incentivize. I think we're going to do a deep dive in Eigenlayer because we keep dancing around it. And so we'll hit on it right now, knowing that, because that one I'm not convinced yet. So with Eigenlayer, you stake your ETH. So what do we say? 25% of ETH is staked. So it does. The short answer is I think no, it does not.
Right.
That Eigenlayer restaking of staked assets don't count in that total number. But that 24.71, I mean, more and more miners more and more validators are coming online to stake, or you could just put your ETH with Lido and they'll just keep firing up more staking pools for you. So I know that number has gone up. It says 0.35% in the last 24 hours or 7 days. So it's 24%, but look at Solana. Solana's at 67, so 68% of all Solana is staked. So basically over 2/3 of Solana is staked. The inflation rate of Solana is 6.38%, and the reward rate is 7.9%, which is interesting because that goes to show you the reward is just, because if you're getting a reward and you're not outpacing inflation, obviously that reward is a complete scam, right?
Yeah.
Or it's certainly not something you're going to invest in. So the reward rate is 7.19, 6.38 for the inflation. So basically that tells you there's a little bit of fees on the network. Most of it is being absorbed, I think, by the team to keep fees low, because I don't think they can do that forever, because you have the cost of the machines. Like at some point,
right,
if for an ecosystem to sustain itself, you have to reward the validators, miners, stakers, whatever they call them in Solana, to be able to validate the transactions. And right now, I think it's very heavily subsidized, so rates are cheap. So more and more people go there because, ETH, when ETH gets clogged, ETH gets expensive, and ETH gets expensive really fast, right? So the reason I bring any of this up is because if you're 2/3 stake, and remember the foundation, I don't remember the breakout of Solana and how much the foundation got and how much like early adopters got, but let's put it this way. There was a couple buckets. I wish I had the chart in front of me, but there's a pie chart someone made of like the big coins back. This is like a 4-year-old little pie chart, but it was like the team allocation, like 20%. Like, that seems fair. But then there was all these other buckets that were equally as big, like the founders, 23%. You're like, okay, you're like triple dipping here. And so my point is, I think Solana is still very concentrated and centrally owned. Obviously, they're validating their own network. They're running a ton of these rigs in their inner circle. These rigs, you have to have a fiber line. I think the hardware is pretty strong, and that's the biggest complaint, because with Ethereum, you could buy a little $500 machine, have a decent internet connection, and you can have a validator. It's not a big deal. You don't need tons of processing power. This is the opposite. This is, as David Hoffman always says, and he's right, Solana is more of a hardware solution, right? You're just throwing more strong processing power to and bandwidth to process these transactions. So I don't know why it went down. Frankly, I don't really care. Maybe we'll look into it more, but I think that's part of the reason why the price didn't go down, because degens were like, well, it'll be back up. And but it goes to show you, like, maybe
it did go back up.
Yeah, it went up right away. When I did the math yesterday, after it came back up, it was up 1.4%. So obviously, let's call that flat for the day. But it just goes to show you that maybe more education is needed in this space to let people know that immutability and that this stuff's important. And blockchains, like if I have a blockchain, there's one thing I want it to do, and that's be on, and process things. And, the crazy thing is, and we'll get into this in a bit, I know you were going to talk about, now we're learning that like FTX is paying people back and stuff like that. And, you scratch your head and think, how in God's name is FTX paying the folks back? They burned through all our money with those houses down or whatever that island he was on. And the reason is, I believe it was the Bitcoin had appreciated so much. Maybe it had Solana in there too, but there was one or two assets that had appreciated so much. It had gone up since last spring that they're able to make everybody whole. But there's a bigger point here. And that's like when TradFi fails, the lawyers get involved. Everything gets locked for, 2 to 10 years. And then people get pennies on the dollar and the lawyers get 33% for dealing with it and presenting the case. When crypto unwinds, if the smart contracts are sound and the funds can be gotten, the keys aren't lost or whatever, it might slow down. Maybe USDC unpegs to the dollar for a little, but it unwinds and the people get their money first if it's in the smart contract. So it's a very fascinating thing. Like people be like, oh, DeFi didn't work. It's like, no, it worked. Like it went cheaper because it got unpegged as this whole thing came crumbling down to 3 Arrows or FTX. But if it was in smart contracts, it could be gotten out and in this case, the value went up. So it's a fascinating study. And that's why, that's why we're all here, because the traditional financial system has worked for a long time, but we have something better now, and it's not 100%, but it's slowly Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, whatever coin you're into, they're slowly working their way in to the financial system. And what, everybody, we said it on the spaces yesterday, but we'll say it again, like, in the ordinal space, obviously we're all early bleeding edgers still, but in the Bitcoin space, everyone who was on that call yesterday and everyone who's in this call now, we're early adopters, and we just crossed the chasm to the early, to the mainstream. Right. So, and it's a cool moment because now any company can put Bitcoin on their balance sheet with the new accounting rules that Michael Saylor helped do. Pension funds, obviously folks like us who just want to put Bitcoin ETFs on their, Bitcoin on their retirement funds. Like I always want to, not your keys, not your crypto, but if I have a retirement fund I can't touch till I'm much older, like I'm going to put some Bitcoin in there for sure. I'm going to ride that wave. And people who are against that, it's like, what am I going to do? Like cash out my retirement account? I got Bitcoin too. I got my private keys. I got my Bitcoin, but I'm going to get more,
I saw a tweet, in the last 24 hours of somebody who said they showed like the, Fidelity recommended asset allocation for Canada, where obviously they've already had ETFs in place, and it indicated 1 to 3% of a portfolio towards cryptocurrencies. And then it was like, just imagine when that becomes adopted from a United States perspective as well. So we're seeing something, and those of us who have some tread on the tires, have seen this in other elements of life, like we've seen Web 2 come, we've seen, innovations in distribution, going to, using streaming for music and, all this stuff. So we've seen it. And this is just, it's probably a bigger wave, but we've seen this happen before. So it becomes almost inevitable. And I think that this space has passed the point of inevitability. And, we see, and we can talk about this now, we see kind of the roadblocks still being put into place by, the status quo and those who don't really have the vision or don't really see it. And one of the big things that we need to really battle for is to not let narratives be constructed and strewed out there that are detrimental to what is really becoming adopted and needs to be adopted. So it seems like every week we go through, talking about what the SEC or what, elements of the government are doing to try to, take the air out of one of the tires or put the banana peel out in front of you just to make sure that it doesn't happen. It's like Beverly Hills Copy stuff, but you see all these different things. One of the things we want to get more into is kind of understanding why they're asking these questions, suddenly emergency, information from the miners and the Bitcoin miners, and what, where that fits into the pie overall of where things are headed. But we did see this SEC rule come out, and it was adopted, like it did actually become adopted.
It passed 3-2. Yeah.
And 3-2, something else. The ETF passed 3-2, but it was the other way, right?
So Gensler, obviously he's the decider. So with the ETFs, with the court case, I assume he had no choice, but with this one with DeFi. So Disco, tell us what, just give us an overview of what happened.
Yeah, well, there's the SEC basically voted to adopt rules that require market participants, to do all this, and basically have them register if it's over a certain dollar figure, and kind of the net of the outcome is that it really impacts or has the ability to impact, kind of who can do what in DeFi, and kind of who has the ownership and the rules of the road to kind of tell DeFi what it needs to do and become. And again, I hate seeing things stifled before they really get a chance to mature and even get to the point of what they can actually do. I know that the industry is upset that, again, you're not getting a lot of clarity in terms of what they're saying, but they're pretty much trying to stomp in and kind of shut down things that they think are going to take part of their cheese. And it's just such a recurring theme. And I know I don't want to get on too big a soapbox, but I really think that if the whole space is going to mature to the point that it needs to be able to combat this, there needs to be kind of some more working together and some more understanding of putting resources towards being able to combat this constant flow of negativity that's coming out directly, and it's all directed at this space. So it's just, they keep kind of chipping away. You kind of look underneath it all. And I don't want to, you kind of always see an Elizabeth Warren somewhere advocating for, taking it down in whatever way you want to do it.
Well, and saying the same lies over and over, right? Like many things have been disproven, like how much of the illicit money that's transacting in crypto. And I know Chainalysis was like, it's maybe 0.5%, so 0.5%, somewhere around there. I'll look at the exact number, but it's well below 1%. And then illicit funds, I know for the US dollar, I think it's like 2 or 3%. So, I mean, that's a 6x over crypto, and crypto is way more transparent, which would be very cool to see with government. But yeah, the SEC implications are very big. There's a couple reasons. If you're basically providing, like you're a market maker, you're providing liquidity in DeFi, obviously, Uniswap comes to mind. There's so many places where you can, I'm thinking of Wi-Fi and all the DeFi stuff going on, especially in the Ethereum chain. And now Solana's heating up with this. They're kind of having their DeFi moment. If it's over $50 million, so they are excluding like smaller market makers, which in a way is cool, but I don't think this was meant to be cool at all.
No.
Over 50 million liquidity providers and market makers, you're basically have to register with the SEC. And obviously, if for anyone who's been in crypto a long time, they had the whole, the New York state laws. They made just this gauntlet from hell of forms you had to fill out. The only people that got it were literally people who were on the board who quit to take high-paying consulting jobs at the companies, and they're the ones that got through. It's like what's it called, the Bybit. There was a stupid name for it, but it was just so egregious. That's what this reminds me of. And I know the groups were not, the industry response from DeFi Education Fund. They're just like, we didn't get a seat at the table. This is all new to us. This is a surprise, and it's completely going to stifle innovation. And again, here we go. Yeah. We got boomers. We got Janet Yellen. I mean, who knows how old Yoda is, like you got all these people, jokes aside, you got all these people who don't understand. They were born analog and they had digital maybe when they were in their 40s or 50s. So they were probably bosses by then. They never had to adapt. At least, you and I are way more cutting edge. I've been in crypto since 2015. You've been in for a couple of years. We're way more cutting edge than our generation, and we're firmly rooted in Gen X, but we started analog and then we went full digital, getting cell phones, I think by 23, 24, 25 years old. No, maybe 26, 27 years old. So we have spent half our lives analog. And, we played Kick the Can and Bloody Murder and basketball till 11 at night with the lights on. But we've also seen the digital side, and some of us have embraced it. But this has got to stop, because if someone understood this better and the innovation and the money it will bring in for the country and taxes and the reform it will do to the TradFi system in getting the banks and the Fed from being the middleman to being more transparent so we can all transact freely. And if they want to use high tech snooping tools like Chainalysis and stuff, it's transparent. It's out there. So you can see it and you can go after the bad guys. So the story is thin on their side, but it's almost like sometimes it sucks, but you almost think you have to fight the good fight, and you also have to wait till these boomers just retire. But we got 2 80-year-olds running for president. So
thank you.
Party is just like, get out. Look, we don't want you anymore. Sorry, but you're out of touch with where things are going. And cryptography came into the mainstream for a reason. Look at the deepfake story that just came out. Do you see that guy who was able to deepfake with a fake person a video chat to get approved for an account? You know how you do the government stuff, Illinois got stuff like that. But you literally have to go on, and they deep faked the whole thing with AI. If that doesn't make you scared, I don't know what will. And, I don't know what the perfect solution, but I can tell you, having a hardware wallet and public private key transactions where you sign something so it can be attributed to you, that's a pretty damn good start. So thank God crypto's here as a foundation for all of this to evolve, and for TradFi, because basic login and passwords, it's done. It's done. It's over.
Yeah, and that was almost ironically, came to light in terms of the fake ETF approval announcement, and having the SEC not understand their own authentication. It's like that feels like 4 years ago, by the way, but that didn't happen
3-4
all that long ago.
Yeah. And they didn't. Remind us, they did not have 2FA on.
Yeah, they turned it off or something. Yeah, somebody. It was turned off at the moment
because 7 people had that password on a Post-it and in their unencrypted PCs that they left on the subway. I mean, just absurd. To get socially engineered and hacked, if someone wants to go after you, they will. So just stay below the radar. But the SEC, you're preaching out there and you can't even keep your Twitter account safe. So again, like you said, old news, but well done tying it to the greater story, because everything, all these threads weave together quite beautifully.
Yeah, I hear you. I guess if we go back to just kind of looking at some of the other headlines, I think we would be remiss not to acknowledge and give a little bit of good time to Farcaster and kind of the story that's being built there. And we've had conversations about various social medias, we've had conversations about decentralization and everything like that. And I've voiced my own frustrations about certain platforms that I've been trying to engage with, and a lot of people have been. A lot of people have
Twitter.
Been.
Algorithm, well, then find me.
Well, then tweet. So I get it. But
tweet and connect with people, right? And it's you make real connections. Even though Twitter can be a cesspool, there's a lot of good dialogue in there. There's a lot of good dialogue.
Yeah, and I'm in the process of the pruning, as we've discussed, and it's been bearing fruit just in terms of not having open it up and it being like a system of a down toxicity in our city song play over.
Disco just stopped following BitBoy. Oh, his timeline's cleaning up.
I know we had to do the unfollow on a few things, but one of the big
So
things,
much garbage.
if we can talk about it, is the user, like the daily active users on Farcaster has really kind of showed a pretty undeniable, hockey stick up growth situation. And one of the things that they've done recently was launching frames. And I'm not a very technical person, as most of the people who've listened to the show know, but I know from a user experience that being able to go outside of a platform's ecosystem seamlessly makes things a lot easier from a user perspective. And that's kind of the net of where I'm at on what I'm seeing on that. And I think it's cool because I think that there's room, just like we say, there's room for a lot of different blockchains or a lot of different communities or whatever. There's uses and rule and opportunities for different social media platforms. And I just want to give a little bit of kudos to seeing one that's starting from more decentralized roots. We can always argue how pure everything is in terms of how on chain and how, what the deep down ethos is, but these numbers don't lie. So it kind of shows that there is a capacity in the overall market space for something new. And if you really think about it, we haven't seen a significant new entrant into the social media space, for 20 years, right? We really haven't seen something come in there that's really changed. TikTok obviously, has done a lot and had a big impact, but
yeah, we'll say for the crypto space for sure. But yeah, with the kids and our kids, like TikTok and Snapchat and all those, but Farcaster, yeah, it's made a big inroads, and I've actually been on it. I got lucky. I was invited by Dan Romero like a year ago. I was not part of that first year. I think they've been beta testing this for a long time, but I got in probably last January, February, maybe March. I don't know when it was, and I've made some good connections over there, and I run the CryptoPunks group over there now. What made, and I knew this was coming. I saw it. I probably should have posted more there, but now we're so focused on Spaces and Twitter and him building out kind of a lot of these media tools that you can't be everywhere at once. But I think what Farcaster did well, it was a 1-2-3 punch. First, they realized they were getting bigger and they added groups. And first they added their own groups and they just asked everybody like, hey, what should I add? And I was always like Ordinals and CryptoPunks. And he didn't add either. This is a very, I assume A16Z is behind it, but there's definitely a more VC heavy, like West Coast vibe, I would say. There's a lot of really good posts there, but I will say one of the most genuine things about Farcaster is you can actually have a very good conversation back and forth in it, and it's very thoughtful. And some of the biggest names are now coming over there. Like, you can have a conversation with Vitalik's probably pretty big now, especially now that we see this hockey stick on our screen, how big it's gone. But they did these groups, and the groups allowed you to spread it out. So he didn't create CryptoPunks, but then they said, okay, we're going to give you these warp tokens. They're worthless. Don't hoard them. But if you have enough warps, you can create your own group. So I was like, oh, I'll create the CryptoPunk group. And then they followed it up 3 weeks later, and they're like, hey, now you can token gate a private chat. So now you can see now they're starting to tread not only in Twitter DMs, but also into Discord, right? So, and anyone who's big into PFPs and art is probably a part of some Discord. And I think some of the best conversation happens in some of your best Discord groups. But now with groups and with the token gated chat, there's some bugs still. It's still early, but they got to get delegate cash. A lot of punks are like, I'm not connecting my punk wallet directly to Farcaster. And I'm like, no, I don't blame you. Oddly, delegate cash did work for some of the people and didn't work for others. So I'm trying to sort that out. And I think, and basically I reached out to Dan, and he got back to me within 10 minutes, and he's like, we know it's a problem for the more expensive PFP collections to have these groups. We need to get delegate cash set up. Right now, it's not our main priority, but it is on the list. So I was like, cool. Thanks for letting me know. And so everything on Farcaster is just kind of a cool, it's growing a work in progress. But then the triple and the slam dunk, frames took Farcaster by storm. And the first people who started making frames, it was genius because they were like, hey, here's a little NFT, but before you can click the button. So basically think someone tweets or posts, he casts, right? And you get it. And then it says, you have to recast this, retweet it, you have to like it, and you have to comment on it. So you have to do all three. Then you can click on within the cast, you can click it to mint it right then and there without going to any screen. That's why it's called frames, because a frame and I don't know if you know this, Disco, you probably know this in website parlance. That's like something that's like you have a website and you have a YouTube video. This is an analogy, but it's punching through. So think of those as frames, right? So that's the beauty of this. And it just, that 1, 2, 3 punch with frames being by far the biggest one, because now they're different. Like frames is really unlike anything else. Now you're like, oh man, I could have people, like our podcast, like you could watch it in a frame and just maximize the window. Now, obviously video storage and stuff is Farcaster's still trying to work on. And there's people like Brennan's working on Tavern FM, right? Which is like audio, which is more Farcaster, not specific, but tied to it. So there's a lot of elements that are coming out, but definitely kudos to Farcaster. It's having its time, and that hockey stick, I think some will try, some will go. I think a lot of people will stick around because there's a group for everybody. And I will say the groups are very small and intimate now. If you're heavy on Twitter right now and you come over and you'll probably see people you recognize, but within groups, if you're in specific groups, you'll definitely recognize some people and kind of create that home base to go over there. So kudos to Dan and Varan and the whole team.
One thing that I think is cool about it is, it's more encouraged to click on a link that may take you outside of, that ecosystem, or encouraging that. And I think that openness to having that, be part of the user experience instead of, no, stay inside the swimming pool, you can't get out and go to another one. I think that may end up being a very strategically intelligent maneuver to kind of let people go and do what they need instead of trying to, kind of construct the walls of the kingdom and keeping you within.
Yep. Hey, Disco, I made my first mistake. I actually had a cough and I muted that whole, unfortunately, Farcaster thing. So I'll edit it out after. But for everyone out there, basically, Farcaster did frames. They have private token gated groups per PFP. Delegate cache still needs to be worked out, and they have specific groups. So there's something for everyone there. I've been there for like a year. I was muted that whole time. I think we can slice that out of YouTube, but kudos to Farcaster for not only competing with Discord and Twitter DMs, with the groups and the private chats and stuff like that, but also with frames, creating a whole new ecosystem and functionality that's gonna now they're figuring out ways to separate it. And you made a good point. How decentralized is Farcaster? They did it, I think, where they thought they needed to, because if you decentralize every post, obviously then you have gas fees and you have all this stuff. When you go to layer 2s and maybe even layer 3s, maybe that stuff will be easier and possible to go all on chain. But for now, the cool thing is it's your identity. So you can take your identity everywhere as this ecosystem grows. And the identity is the most important thing you own. So I think it was a good first step. Yeah. So anyway, I apologize, guys. I made my first gaffe. I looked over and the mute button was on. But yeah, Farcaster, kudos to Dan and Varan and the whole team for that, because it's pretty cool.
It's interesting. Just this wasn't set up to be a theme of the program or the show, but it's exciting when you're talking about, success stories, and you're starting to see, different kind of use cases get traction. And, we're talking about, like it getting into this next level. And we just had, I was just going through kind of the bear market feeling where it was like, okay, yeah, but when's the next shoe going to drop, in the other direction? But now it's like you're seeing fireworks pop off from all over the place. It's like you're up on top of a roof and you're seeing all these neighborhoods, kind of bringing back some wins. So seeing Farcaster have the success it has, seeing, the RSIC and seeing it's just, there's so many, really interesting things that are really starting to kind of hit the road, and you're starting to see kind of just where all this passion and interest that we all had when everyone was kind of, crapping on the space and saying, oh, it's over, It's really validating. I think it just kind of makes everyone not really puff your chest, but just kind of feel validated for the belief when you start seeing these things come to life. It was always a question of, okay, well, in a bear market, you build, right? And now we're starting to see a lot of those outcomes of the building that was happening. And, it really does kind of lend itself to being like, okay, we're looking at the beginning of the next chapter, and where this can go in this next chapter has never been experienced before. So it's really cool.
Yeah. And you brought up early, you're like, is this the bull everyone was talking about? And I would say, yeah, I know you got in high. We haven't reached Bitcoin all-time highs at whatever it was, 68. And I know you got in at the end of last cycle, like most people do. Like, you're not alone there. And then the crazy ones who do a little research, or maybe have a couple buddies who are like, no, dude, there is something here. You're onto something. But you're right. It is nice to get validated. But yes, this is what a bull run FOMO feels like. And it's probably good. Like, I wish in hindsight we had started our show more in the bear, so we had even more time, like in the last 2 years, or really the last year. But now, yeah, this is what a bull feels like. And it's fun, but it also, you need, the more cycles you go through, like Bitcoin halving cycles or whatever, or bear bull cycles, the more, the smarter you get, and the more disciplined you get with your, like, if you see cool art, sometimes you just FOMO in, but you take more strategic bets, like with R6, to take like, hey, maybe I'll take a couple off the table here and sell. And I did that, and it went up again. And then I got back in at an even higher price. So I should have, like, again, what's the old mantra? Like, had I just bought the Bitcoin in 2015 and 2016 and the ETH in whatever, 2017, and done nothing, I'm pretty sure I'd still be far richer. So I am no master trader, but we're also not trying to alpha people here. We're trying to teach people not only about, NFTs, Ordinals, and Bitcoin and ETFs and all that stuff, but also like the bigger picture, and about freedom to transact, and, freedom of speech, and all that stuff. So it all ties together. And I think the more we're in the space, the more we realize maybe that education torch, even though you make it fun, like obviously our spaces that just went crazy, we talk about R6, but you pepper in, be like, hey guys, remember, there's a bigger picture. The Phil Zimmermans are the ones that allowed this to happen. I think if you do that, you do it responsibly, you've passed the torch to the next generation, gotten rid of some of the maxi stuff, but incorporated a lot of the good stuff.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And we also have to look at it from, that's why we take the time to, talk about the SEC and the political side of it, is because it needs to at least be addressed and called out. And hopefully we can come up with a good, kind of correlated response, and be able to kind of refute some of that stuff. Because if no one's in there, kind of bouncing back, then it becomes kind of the reality within that one echo chamber. And unfortunately, that echo chamber of legislation has a lot of influence on how things can shake out down the road.
Yeah. And you just don't know who's behind making some of these bills. And that's why, not only are we going to get into the trenches with Ordinals and R6 and all that fun stuff, but we're also going to look at, how to protect our freedoms, and make sure, in 10 years, we're still able to hold private keys, and the banks haven't been served as our custodians. Like, gee, thanks. There's a whole movie on that. What's the movie about the Native Americans out West, where the custodians handle their money, and it's the murder. It's the Osage Indian one.
Yeah, it's the Flowers of the Moon or whatever, the new
Flowers of the
Scorsese.
Killer Moon or something. Yeah, I read the book and it's fascinating. Anyway, so we are a self-sovereign nation, and we are an interdependent group of people, and we all need each other, but we also need the freedom to be able to spend what we want when we want. And if that is illegal, then the authorities should go after you, but you need that freedom. So I know we keep circling back to that, but it's important.
Yeah, and on the same token, like, we're trying to create, a movement of independent media, and be part of something where we're not answering to anyone kind of above us, and be able to cover what we want and talk about what we want. So if you have a chance and you're inclined, and you can hit a subscribe button or give a like or make some comments, that does kind of help give us a little bit of fuel to keep going, and kind of spread the reach. So we don't like to shill for it, but if you don't mind subscribing, we'd certainly appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, and Disco, before we go on, Disco made a good point, because we do have one follower, and we are, this eCamp does allow you to see questions, but we don't have it activated. We're just experimenting. Usually we record these and then we upload them right after. But we're just playing around to see if we can A, save time going live, but B, just to see if there's any effect. So to that one viewer out there, we appreciate you watching, because I can see a little one in the corner and two little thumbs up. But there's a whole thing where we can actually get live comments and see hearts and stuff. So there's cool stuff there. So I assume you were going to take us now into the ETF stuff, which we have been. It's been our top biller for the last couple of weeks, but now it's a part of TradFi. Like, Bitcoin is there. It's had its moment, but there's things to talk about. There's housekeeping to talk about there. So Disco, you set the table. I'm just going to let my little pooch just open the door and be out, and I'll be right back.
Yeah. So as Blutoshi said, we've been talking a lot about, the ETF. Is it coming? Is it approved? What does it mean when it landed? And I don't want to say that it's like no news is good news, or no news is really, we need to cover it necessarily. I think that it's kind of gone into the bucket of traditional finance, and the ETF kind of represents that opportunity for folks. We've talked about it, till we're blue in the face, Blutoshi, and we're sitting there like, okay, what were the winners going to be? So I don't think we need to dedicate as much time to it moving forward. We'll keep our eye on it and check it and everything, like we're saying. And one of the big stories that came out, in the past couple of days, is that the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF, IBIT, is now in the top 5 of all ETFs. Yeah. So if you just zoom out and give that some credit, you're looking at, something that's 17, 18 days old, yet it's been able to infiltrate something as established as the ETF market and be able to become a top 5 player. I just think it shows that while things may not move that quickly in terms of, some of us thought, it's just going to, skyrocket immediately. There was so many issues that kind of came into play that we didn't really factor in prior, with the grayscale and, people, kind of getting out of the GBTC and seeing how that kind of settled and everything. But to see, 18 days or whatever it is into the life of a new offering, seeing it be accepted to become in the top 5 of all of them available, I think it kind of tells the whole story. One funny note:
Fidelity's got to be up. Fidelity's got to be top 10 though, because I mean, you got Bitcoin in the first 17 days at 3 billion. BlackRock at 3 billion in. You got Fidelity at 2.6 billion in. Those are the only two above a billion. You had ARK next at 692 million, and then Bitwise at 674. So there's the other ones will be just fine, but I'm just amazed at how that's got to be top 10 too. GBTC, we knew they'd lose some money because people were getting out of that trade for multiple reasons, but they're 6 billion down, but the net after 17 days is 1.6 billion in. At some point, Grayscale is going to stop bleeding, and all the education of all these companies to all their financial advisors, it's just starting. So, I think a lot of us, me included, thought it was going to go up right away, but this is definitely the long game. And I think, like you said, if Fidelity is saying like, hey, I don't know who it was, to institutions or financial planners, like, hey, 1 to 3% is a fair allocation to crypto. I mean, obviously not everyone's going to do that at once, but some are going to do 5% or 10%. And some billionaires are going to be like, well, I need 100 million of that, like it's
Yeah.
there's so much potential. So pension funds, I mean, and on and on and on. And now it's just like normal. It's like now you couldn't buy the packs of gum at any convenience store or any hardware store. You couldn't get them anywhere. And now the gum is widely available anywhere. So you can just grab it and go. Hubba bubba.
It's like a pouch of Big League Chew.
Big League Chew. Okay. I was going to say Hubba Bubba because I lived by a kid that we both grew up with. His dad was like the vice president of marketing, and he'd bring home new flavors. Like I got to try the raspberry one or the blueberry one before everybody else. He's like, you want a couple boxes for home? I'm like, oh, I mean, I was a sugar fiend. Like, and Hubba Bubba, I think was, Bubble Yum, I think was the most popular, but I thought Hubba Bubba was it was better. It was a little less sugary. It was a little more, it was just a good chew.
We also had someone who was involved with the Orange Crush company, and that was still my favorite field trip, was when we got to go to the Orange Crush bottling facility, and that was the first time that I was exposed to Grape Crush, which to this day remains the best of the crushes in my opinion.
Interesting. A Strawberry Crush, that stuff.
Oh,
strawberry gives you a total bellyache though. Like I used to go up there with my allowance and I'd get Okie Dokie popcorn and Strawberry Crush, and I would just eat the whole big bag of the cheese Okie Dokie popcorn and down a Strawberry Crush from Gleason's, and
and knock it back with some nerds.
Yeah, at least I didn't. Like one friend, we had get it stuck in his nose, had to get it surgically removed. Like, and my son goes, "Why didn't he just let it melt?" I'm like, "Yeah, why didn't he just let it? Like, eventually the damn thing's gonna disintegrate. Have a little sugar high, you'll be done. Stop sneezing." So
see, the kids are smarter now. The kids are smarter. Really quickly to wrap up kind of the ETF side of it. Sailor did purchase another 850 Bitcoin, taking his total up to a clean 190,000. So I wonder if that was just to round it up and have a nice number or what.
I think Sailor's one of those people. It's just like, for us with R6 right now, like, have 9, but really want 10, like there's like, we've all been in that, or like, I have 1.1 or 1.92 Bitcoin, might as well round up. He's like, he's rounding up to 190,000 Bitcoin, which now you're like, oh, he's gone for 200,000, no problem. It's just now it's just harder and harder to get. But every time that guy can, whatever he's issuing new stock or bonds, however he's doing it, like he is just a machine. And the funny thing is, you get these Bitcoin ETFs, and he's still just because he got in earlier. He's just a monster.
And he hasn't wavered. So,
and he's got he is laser-eyed maxi. Can you imagine if Sailor got into Ordinals? He'd be like, Blutoshi, I want to buy your Ordinal Punk for, what do you want? 100 Bitcoin? I'd be like, okay, that would be wonderful, And I'd be like, all right, Disco, well, I'm retired. I'll see you later. So that's my go to bed wishful thinking thought.
Yeah, and once again, it's tied to the ODM, the mind share theory that you're going to bring it back to him wanting to get one of your ordinals because they're inscribed, and we can get into all that as well. One of the things we like to try to do is, we talk about a lot of different things, and we're talking about how there's, a diverse amount of things to cover and things to focus on. But going back to some of the stuff we've covered in the past, one story that really kind of got me excited, and we'll see how it plays out. But we did an episode where we were talking a lot about my experience with the Gemini Earn program, and there's a lot of folks that have been waiting to see how this plays out and have been hopeful, and it may turn out, if things go the right way, that Gemini handled it quite well, because I think tomorrow there's going to be a ruling that would give Genesis, who basically is what owes where Gemini Earn folks would get redeemed from, the authorization to sell stuff out of the trust, their GBTC, and then be able to use that to go back to kind of redeem the Gemini Earn people like myself that got locked out, and we've just been sitting in pending for 8, 12, whatever months it is. I don't even look at it. And the one reason I bring it up that I'm very hopeful on is I was reading through some tweets from some folks who are more versed in kind of the ins and outs of the proceedings, and the net is they're saying that we are hopeful that we'll be getting paid back in kind with what we had as opposed to US dollar equivalences. So if that happens, that would be, I mean, obviously it would suck that I had to sit that long without access to investments or funds that I had, but to be able to be made whole would be a really nice thing to do. And I'd have to really, turn around and give credit to the twins for, helping to orchestrate that and for fighting within the courts to make this come to life. So more to follow on that, but I'd feel remiss if we didn't at least kind of give that update. And as I say, I think it's going to be something will be approved tomorrow on the 8th. So we'll be sure to circle back on that, but that would make me a lot happier. And that would probably get me, jumping more into the RSIC world and getting involved with a couple different things if I could get a little clarity on those funds.
And you're saying it will be in because the most important thing, obviously, crypto's gone up since this all went down last year at the beginning. You're saying it will be in crypto, so you will get your gains they said, too.
Yeah, to one of the posts that was out there, the first question was, is it safe to say Earn depositors will end up with USD equivalent of Bitcoin at the time of bankruptcies? And they're saying, no, it would be Bitcoin to Bitcoin. So to me, that would be really, that would be a big victory.
Win. And I was making fun of you in these last couple episodes. I'm like,
I know.
Because I thought it came from them, but it came from, you're saying, more of a quote unquote somewhat reliable third party source saying no, it's going with the lawyers now and at the time of, and it's the dollar value at the time of, which is a very convenient way as they're doing the bankruptcy stuff. And it sounds like things are working out and you get your crypto, which is great because it also doesn't fuel a transaction either.
Precisely.
There's many wins there.
I was talking about it. I'm like, well, then I'll keep it in Gemini, that's fine. Because if it comes full circle and it ends up getting back, obviously there were mistakes made in terms of how things were put together on that program, but ultimately if it comes back, that'd be a win story for me. So I'll definitely keep everybody in the loop on that as that progresses. The one side note to that though is I believe they said it was like 1.1 billion in GBTC. So if that gets unloaded into the market, then that could affect, the price and the inflows for a little bit. But again, Plutoshi, I'm in this new mindset of, I don't want to say number go down, but if number stays consistent or doesn't meteorically rise, Disco has more opportunities to, get involved in some of these things. Whereas I know that you preach and I agree, 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin, but if 1 Bitcoin can be acquired for, 42,000 as opposed to 82,000, it makes a couple more options available moving forward.
100% agree. I mean, I still have to go from TradFi dollars, from money earned from IRL working to Bitcoin for sure. So, it's interesting. You make a good point. Cause like if GBTC has to get rid of 1.1 billion Bitcoin or $1 billion in Bitcoin to kind of solve that stuff. So that puts more sell pressure on. So it keeps the price of Bitcoin down while the offset of just more and more trickling in to these ETFs and more people are buying Bitcoin and getting in the ecosystem and slowly accumulating. You're right. Like as long as we're seeing it here on the show and, helping others see when we go back to that chart, if so this 6 billion in Grayscale is going to go down, to at least 7 billion now, that can offset these, and it's not a perfect 1-to-1, but then, you keep the price of Bitcoin down because at some point, remember you got Mt. Gox too, right? And the US government, I believe, is auctioning those off. It's like, oh, they're going to do it now. I mean, I've been in crypto for 9 years and Mt. Gox was before my time. I'm 2015. I think Mt. Gox was end of 13 or 14. It was right before, because I know when I entered, I got lucky because it was crab season. It was like $250 Bitcoin. And then maybe it went up like by the end of that year. So I think I just, like I said, got lucky, but the MT Gox was before my time and that hasn't even been doled out yet, which is just crazy.
Wow. It's weird when you say 2015, I was trying to figure it out in my head. I can now say 2021, so we're sitting here in 24. Like it's starting, the years are starting to add up. Like they go quickly, and a lot of things happen. But now I can kind of say I'm from the class of 21, which isn't the class of 24. So I'm getting a little bit of legs under me.
That is crazy that's 3 years. So that was so the COVID was 2020. That's when everybody completely over.
Yeah, that was like February. Yeah, so that was February really of 20. So,
okay. And then you were like early 21. So you were like, was this, cause
I was late 21. I was like fourth quarter 21, like October-ish of 21 was when I first did anything.
All right. So was it peaking? I know you said you came in at a bull. Oh, that's when it was peaking. I always thought it was earlier.
Yes.
So you're saying that the last bull, so the 68,000, that it was peaking at that end of 21. Okay. That's when I got into NFTs.
Right.
So that makes sense. Okay. Well, kudos to you and to anybody. Kudos to you for sticking around in this market, because now you're seeing, you haven't gotten some of the huge rewards yet, but I don't know, even 68,000 Bitcoin or $100,000 Bitcoin, I see it, but again, we're the crazy ones. But I guess back to a bigger picture, think about like what you saw in the spaces to kind of bring it home, and think about how just in crypto in general, think about how into it people are. Like you have passion things like, I love sports. I love basketball. I'm not a watcher of many sports, but I still play softball, but I should be done. But like people are passionate about sports. People are passionate about music, playing the guitar, like playing music, listening to music and stuff. But the passion in crypto, it ties in politics, money, and that's probably why it's predominantly dudes right now. We definitely need more females in this space, like the old stodgy, like guys talking politics. And I think they're coming, but it's amazing. People, and I think we saw in the spaces, and we're just seeing more and more now, especially in a bull, people are so into this and they want to go down the rabbit holes, and you got the Joe Rogans who kind of started the trend of the 3-4 hour podcast. Like, let's dive deep on things and let's just give whatever we're talking about space to breathe. Cause I think we're in a new era where people want to hear interesting and deep concepts.
That's well said. And it leads like, I haven't experienced the rewards yet. Monetarily, that's true. But from a interest and kind of purpose perspective,
right,
it's completely come into my life at the right time. And it
well said.
It helps you to be able to, there's nothing better than going down a rabbit hole and then it leading to another one that is just as interesting. And you're starting to build kind of your own system of tunnels and links and seeing that all come to life and how it all builds together and weaves together, which is kind of a theme that we've been talking about for months. I get a lot of validation out of that. I don't know if I would just spend money to get it, but I get a good return on my investment of time, and I'm not as concerned about my investment monetarily because my horizon is not short and I'm not looking at it from that lens or that perspective.
Right.
I think we're part of foundational change, and foundational change takes time until it doesn't. And I just love being able to have conversations with you, meet these new people that are thinking about things in really interesting, lenses. And then just to be able to kind of have that saturate my mind as opposed to just, scrolling or flipping through things that don't really, kind of engage me. So I think that's what kind of everybody who does this gets it kind of sucked into their soul and into their system.
Yeah, it's well said. And think about just so many people, like we all go to school and we learn, at some point somebody took economics, macro and micro, but who thought you would learn about like the history of money, the foundation of money, the Keynesians and just the whole philosophy of money. And that's just one. We're not even on the Ordinals, meta protocol RSIC side. We're just talking about the blockchains and Bitcoin in general, what that the replacement of gold. And, because gold right now is slowly shipped around the world, but generally it's just, it's just paper receipts country to country. And, do these ETFs even have the gold? Well, with Bitcoin and the ETFs, who was it? Was it Invesco Galaxy? Bitco was the first one. One of them was like, hey, here are our wallets to show.
Check out the wallets.
Yeah, that's exactly what we have. And I think people, I don't know if the other ones came right out and did the same thing, but I know people have already found most of the other ones. So the addresses are out there, but that transparency is going to teach TradFi. Like at some point they can resist, but it's like, you can resist and be in a very dark corner of the cellar. But at some point, if the light just keeps shining, gets brighter and brighter, the cobwebs and all that stuff are going to go away, and it's going to be slowly replaced by a hybrid system and a better, who knows what the end result will look like. There's going to, obviously a human element probably isn't going to go away anytime soon, but I think we need to help it get there.
Yeah. And kind of the last pin I'll put on that is we'll start hearing, check the wallet will become kind of a understood kind of public mantra, we'll check the wallet. And that'll be so interesting when that happens. And when you were talking about the deep fake side of it and this, emergence of AI, it couldn't be a better partnership to a degree to have all the things that are so positive and transparent about blockchain be able to kind of get in there and play a very positive role in however everything shakes out down the road. So I really, I'm very excited about just everything we're talking about. I want everybody to know that, this show is strictly for entertainment purposes only. Nothing should be construed as financial advice. Do your own research. Don't get yourself hurt. Don't, get over your skis and invest more than you can afford to lose. But, if you want to keep paying attention, there's a lot of things to be interested by. And that's kind of what motivates us every day.
Well said, Disco. Well, take care, everybody. Behind me is one of the new Terraforms I bought, and I absolutely love this thing. On-chain, all Ethereum. But Disco, cool. As always, it was a pleasure doing a show with you. We did it live today, and every little bit is learning. So this is pretty cool. We've had so many conversations offline. We're like, let's bring them online, and let's be honest with everybody. So as Disco said, hit that like button and subscribe button, and tell your friends about it, because we're going micro, we're going macro, but at all things crypto, all things decentralization. So have a great day and take care.
Thanks, everybody.